All right, good morning, everyone. This is Shani from Sanders Brown Center on Aging, and thank you for joining us today. Just a few quick housekeeping items. If you have any questions throughout the program, there's a little Q&A box. You're welcome to type right into that, and then we will get to your questions as soon as there's a chance. Or there should also be a feature where you can click raise my hand. What that enables us to do is if you have a question, we can then unmute you so you're able to verbally ask that if you prefer. Otherwise, you are currently muted as we do this presentation. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kara Lee and Nathan Johnson, who will be talking to us today about physical activity and movement and lots of great stuff. So thank you.
Thank you, Shani. I'm just going to do a brief introduction real quick and let Dr. Lee, Kara, introduce herself as well, as soon as I figure out what's going on with my PowerPoint. So I'm a physical therapist. I teach at UK in the physical therapy program, and the research I'm involved in is I'm mainly interested in how we can age successfully and in a healthy manner and maintain independence as we get older. And in particular, I'm interested in the neuroprotective effects of physical activity and exercise. So that's a little bit of my background. I'll let Kara introduce herself as well too before we get started.
Hi everybody, I'm Kara Lee. I'm a PT. I'm a graduate of the program and now I'm back working in the program. I still do a little clinical work as well in the Kentucky Neurology Institute along with some of the physicians there. And I am peripherally involved in research, mainly related to clinical questions that folks have related to people with neurologic diagnoses, Parkinson's, moving more toward a little bit more look at dementia, definitely work with people with spinal cord injuries and other issues such as post-stroke. So we're glad to have you here today. And of course, we're excited to talk about exercise and moving because that's what we love to do. As soon as Nate put up his screen, I said, you biked the Legacy Trail this weekend. So we know, so we're excited to be outside and moving as well.
Yeah, I'm hoping to make it later today. We'll see if that actually happens. Depends on the schedule. So I need to prioritize my fitness here. So just to give you an outline, here's what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about what factors contribute to mobility and balance. Obviously, as we get older, mobility and independence are two big things that we're all concerned about. I'm aging, we're all aging, so I'm concerned about it myself. I've had injuries in the past. I'm starting to deal with ailments sticking around a little bit longer, and I don't recover as fast. So I'm obviously interested in this myself. So I might not be the best person to practice what I preach right now, just due to the schedule and everything that's going on. But I try to maintain my physical activity as much as possible. We're going to talk to you all also about how we test and physicians test many of these contributing factors and what's important for you to do to maintain your mobility as you age gracefully and successfully. Finally, we're going to talk about some of the basic activities that you can do to help improve your balance and mobility now. So we'll go through some very basic exercises. I'm going to give you some information related to targets that we would eventually like you all to hit as far as how much exercise we would recommend you all perform every week and at what intensity level. But as we'll talk, I'm more interested in just getting any individual moving more than they already do. The target is great, but if you can get out and just initiate a little bit more movement, introduce this into your regular routine, that'll make me happy. I'm sure that'll make Dr. Lee or Kara happy as well. And then hopefully we'll have some time for a discussion at the end. So we're talking about mobility and balance as we get older. And this is the fall I typically like to think about when I think of a fall. So I'm on a nature hike, and this is what I discover at the end of a couple of miles. This is what I typically like to think of as a fall. But as a clinician, these are the falls that we typically think of. Okay, this is what we're trying to prevent. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about several variables today that can contribute to falls and ways that you can combat or decrease your risk. So before we get started, and before we start to talk about some of those contributing factors that help you maintain your mobility and reduce risk of falls, I'm going to give you all a little memory challenge, and I might ask you all to repeat these 3 numbers later on in the presentation. So I want you all to just remember 5, 30, and 14. So hold on to those, and we'll talk about what the significance of these numbers towards the end of the talk. So when we look at balance as a whole here, we have several factors, and this certainly is not an exhaustive list, but these are the primary contributors to balance when we think about our physical function. So when we look at these variables, we're going to talk about each of these individually. I want you all to recognize that flexibility, which we'll talk about, and strength are interrelated, okay? And then head position, vision, and body sensation are also interrelated. And all 5 of these are going to contribute to maintaining balance at any age, actually. So Karen and I talk about our issues with maintaining our balance, and I'm in my early 40s. And as I've already mentioned, a lot of my injuries are sticking around a little bit longer than I'd like them to. So I'm already experiencing some of this myself. And what I note is that when I'm less active, I seem to be at an increased risk for some of the things that we'll talk about today. So vision is kind of an obvious one that's going to contribute to falls, but there's a couple things that I want you all to think about. What I'm denoting down here in the left-hand corner is, again, that interrelationship between vision, your head position, and your body sensation. So visual acuity, as you know, is obviously going to be important. You know, you've got to be able to see what's in your environment in order to navigate safely. But 2 points that I want to drive home are that regular visual checks are very important because of what we just discussed. Being able to navigate in your environment, being able to see your environment is obviously very important. That's the no-brainer one. But if you're not getting regular checkups, there was a study in 2007 that mentioned that close to 3/4 of the individuals that they tested had experienced one fall after receiving major changes in their prescription. So if you're someone that hasn't been to the optometrist in a while and you need a checkup, one thing to recognize is after you've received your new prescription, you need to be very careful because the depth perception has changed after obtaining that new prescription. Now, I also wear glasses, so sometimes when I transition from wearing glasses to contacts, I notice that my spatial representation isn't what it should be. So I have to be very careful when I'm navigating in the environment, when I'm transitioning from contacts to glasses or glasses to contacts. And the same is true if it's been a while since you've had your prescription updated, you go in, you get a new prescription, and your visual acuity changes significantly. So things to be aware of. So get checked frequently so that you prevent that large change in your prescription. Head position is something that maybe a lot of people don't think about, and the term that we often use when it comes to head position is the vestibular system. We'll talk a little bit about the inner ear. Most people think about the inner ear when they think about head position. But if you think about when you're walking and you're navigating your environment, go back to this slide, especially in a grocery store or at night, you're obviously having to attend to a variety of things. You're looking around while you're ambulating. So your head position plays a big role in how well you can maintain your balance. All right, so this is just an example. So I'm an anatomist, I teach anatomy, so I have to have some type of anatomy representation in here, but this is your inner ear, and this is just a representation of these semicircular canals that we find in the inner ear. And this is what happens to the fluid in those semicircular canals when we move our head, all right? So our head position is gonna dictate where our body moves within the environment. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about posture. The other thing to consider when we think about head position are positional changes. So moving from even sit to stand, or from a supine position where you're lying in bed to a seated position on the edge of the bed. So positional changes not only can have an impact on your cardiovascular system, your blood pressure, They can also have an impact on this inner ear, this receptor within your head that lets us know where our head is actually positioned. And so many of y'all might think, you might have heard of the vestibular system before, or the inner ear, but you also might think of something else. Well, I do want to note here that many prescriptions can have an impact on the vestibular system, which therefore can impact balance. So we talked about regular visual checks for visual acuity, talking to your pharmacist. So I know when I fill prescriptions, it's rare that the pharmacist talks to me. If I have questions, I definitely pull them aside and ask appropriate questions. So asking questions about new medications or combinations of medications are very important when it comes to preventing falls. Many of you are probably already aware of this, but it's just something to think about. One thing that I also think about when I think about the vestibular system is this. Okay, and so for those Hitchcock fans, you all would know that this is a clip from the movie Vertigo. So vertigo is this sensation of whirling or a loss of balance. So this can be experienced if we're at the top of a building looking down, or it can be experienced from a disease that affects the inner ear or the vestibular system. Okay, again, vestibular system. When you think of vestibular system, I want you to think of head position. We're going to talk a little bit about posture as well too. Your posture can affect your head position, which can therefore have an impact on the rest of your body. So far we've got vision and we've got head position, two contributing factors to balance. The third that is interrelated with vision and the vestibular system is your body sensation. And there are a couple things that we can think about when it comes to body sensation. We can think about the ability to feel something within our environment, whether that be with our feet or our hands, or it can be whether or not we know where our body is positioned in space. So anybody with grandkids or children, this experience, I don't know if anybody's had this experience, but I've had the experience of stepping on a Lego and it's not comfortable. So that sensation within my foot is very important because that tells me where my foot is in space and what I'm stepping on. If I have a decrease or some type of impaired sensation in my foot, that limits the amount of information that's coming to my brain telling me where my foot is or what I'm stepping on. So body sensation is going to also contribute to balance. Now, what's interesting, and I've got some younger cousins that were surprised when I demonstrated something similar to them, that we can detect where our body is without any visual input. So I mentioned vision, head position, and body sensation contribute to balance. And we can actually eliminate one of those and still maintain our balance. An example of this we'll talk about a little bit later is standing with your feet together with eyes closed. But a nice demonstration here is if you close your eyes, if I close my eyes, I know where my nose is. I can raise my hand. I know my hand is raised. If Kara were to come into my office right now and I were to close my eyes and she was to position my arm out to my side, I could position my other arm to match that same position, okay? But what I can also do is I can, with my eyes closed, I can touch my nose and I can touch my index finger and I can go back and forth between those two parts of my body without seeing my environment, okay? So our body sensation, what we term proprioception, is also important for maintaining balance, okay? So we got vision, body sensation, and head position. All three are interrelated, and those are the three primary things that we rely on for our balance. All right, so this is a nice real-world example of how these three particular sensory systems will integrate to help me maintain my balance. Now, it's interesting, when I was pulling, I just Googled, washing hair and shower, and every picture that I came across was someone smiling while they were washing their hair. I couldn't tell you, I mean, I wash my hair on a regular basis and I've never been this happy while washing my hair. But that's a nice aside. So I want you to think about what is entailed when we wash our hair in the shower. Okay, my head position, if you look at her head position, she's tilted back, okay? So that vestibular system is telling us, okay, where is my head positioned? Okay, that's going to be important for me to maintain my balance. I'm now moving my arms up, so I need to know where they are to massage the shampoo into my hair. And my eyes are closed, okay? So I've got all these factors that are playing a role in helping me maintain my balance. One thing that I haven't mentioned yet is the soapy, wet floor that I'm standing on, okay? Knowing where I am in space, that body sensation, is also going to be important for me to maintain my balance while performing an activity such as washing my hair. Another great example is putting on a shirt overhead, okay? You may or may not close your eyes, but for a second there, you can't see your environment, right? So all three of these things are going to contribute to my safety when it comes to maintaining my balance and not falling in certain scenarios that are required for daily living. So we talked about vision, head position, and body sensation, again, interrelated. Flexibility is also going to play a big role in our ability to maintain balance. Here in a couple slides, we're going to look at the natural regression of posture over time. There are things that we can do to prevent this from happening. But if we lose our ability to move our joints in a particular range of motion, that's going to limit our ability to maintain our balance and even correct our balance. So if I can't elevate my arm to a certain degree because I've lost that range of motion, then I can't reach out and grab that chair, grab the table, grab the wall in order to help me maintain my balance. So flexibility plays a big role in this. We're going to talk a little bit about some exercises that you can do to help maintain your flexibility. This particular woman here is much more flexible than I am. This is one of those things where I tell you that flexibility is important, but when I demonstrate to my students some of the tests that we used in order to test flexibility, I would fail a lot of the tests. So I need to work on my own flexibility. The last thing that we'll talk about that is interrelated with flexibility is going to be strength. So strength is going to be obviously important. We have to be able to move against gravity in order to maintain our balance, in order to perform activities of daily living. So I've got to have enough strength in my arm to lift my arm up to grab something out of the cabinet, okay? I got to be able to lift my arm to reach my arm behind the passenger chair in my car and turn to look to see if there's anybody behind me when I'm backing out. So having enough strength to overcome gravity at the very least is an important factor to maintain balance. The other thing we have to think of when it comes to strength is just sitting to standing, sit to stand. So getting up off the toilet, getting up out of bed. Okay, strength is a prerequisite for all of these activities, as most of you are already aware. Now, two things that I want you all to consider though here, and this goes with everything that I've talked about so far, but more so when we start to talk about strength, are sleep and nutrition, okay? We are not certified or licensed to prescribe sleep or any nutritional metrics to the audience today, but these particular items are certainly important when it comes to maintaining strength. And there might have been a talk, I'm not sure, I haven't looked at the full itinerary for this particular year's meeting, but I know in the past, sleep and nutrition have been big topics when it comes to maintaining health and successful aging. All right, so here I'd like to talk about this interrelationship between strength and flexibility. So I'm guilty of this as well. So now that I'm working on a computer 90% of the time when I'm working, I have a tendency to get closer and closer to my screen. Okay, as I do that, the position of my head changes. Okay, so what I want you all to do is we're going to start with this image here on the left. So this is an ideal posture. All right, so you can see that her ear falls directly above her shoulder here. Now, if we look at the second image here, where does their head? Notice the shift in her head position. So her head has shifted forward. So she's probably been working on a computer for a long period of time, over maybe even several months or years. And the head starts to shift forward because you're trying to get closer to that screen. Again, get your vision checked on a regular basis. It's going to help prevent this as well. So what happens when our head starts to move a little bit more forward relative to our shoulders? Well, then our body wants to follow our head. So now we can see that our shoulders and everything is kind of shifted forward. Okay, so if we look at her hips here, we can now see that her trunk has shifted forward compared to that first particular image. So my body now is starting to follow my head position. So head position is key when it comes to posture. Now, how does this relate to strength and flexibility? Well, the analogy that I use all the time with my students is I always tell them to think about a muscle as a rubber band, all right? So if you have a rubber band on your back here that runs from your shoulders down to your bottom, okay? And you move from this position to this position. So that rubber band now is moving from my shoulders down to my bottom. So that rubber band on the back side is going to be long. And if I have the same rubber band on the front side, that rubber band is now going to be short. Okay? So the one in the front is going to be short and tight, and the one in the back is going to be long and weak. Right? So now it's going to be much harder for this person to pull her shoulders back into this position, to bring her head back into this position, because those rubber bands on the front are now tight, pulling everything forward, and the rubber bands on the back are now weak and long. And they can't perform the appropriate contraction in order to allow this person to retain this upright posture. It changes the relationship in between the flexibility in your legs, flexibility and strength in your legs. So your hamstrings, or the muscles on the back of your leg here, get tight, okay? And your quadriceps in the front, your thigh muscles, the muscles that are going to allow you to stand, are going to get long and weak. So this has a significant impact on your ability to not only perform full range of motion, but then also to overcome gravity. All right, so over time, this is essentially what happens. So we want to try to prevent this with some of the exercises we're going to be demonstrating today. So just to recap, all right, so vision plays a big role in all of this, okay? So frequent vision checks are important. Head position, think about where your head is positioned. So if I rotate to the side here and demonstrate this, so my head position is really important when I'm working at a computer. I don't want my head to be in this position. I want my head to be further back here. That's going to allow my body to be in a better position over time. Body sensation is going to be important. Remember, where is my body located in space, and can I feel the environment within my body? Can I feel what's underneath my feet? And then the last two, flexibility and strength, are going to allow me to maintain this tree pose for a long period of time, and also allow me to be safe when I'm ambulating within my environment. So I think Kara is going to talk to us a little bit about some of the testing that we can do, and then we're going to kind of go back and forth here within the next couple of slides. So what can we do, or what do we typically do in order to test balance and mobility in any population?
That's right. So we have a lot of different ways to test based on what your personal objectives are and just kind of where you are in your health and life journey. If you were to see a PT, you would probably start with some general activities and move to more specific ones. And we wanted to introduce you to just a couple of these right now. We are going to invite you to participate if you feel comfortable and confident in doing so, but only if you feel very safe. And if you're good and awake. I had a lecture to some PT students at 8:30 this morning, and I will admit I'm not sure that they were all awake yet. So definitely, though, if you don't feel safe doing these, that might be a good indication that it would be good to set up an appointment with a physical therapist to just start some balance training with some guidance and some reassurance. And I know that PTs these days are operating in clinics that are open, and they also have telehealth options, telerehab options, where you wouldn't have to be face-to-face, but you could be safe and be guided along in things if you're with COVID-19 not feeling comfortable being face-to-face with people at these times, no matter what measures they're taking. Right, so the 30 seconds hit to stand. I'm going to switch out my chair here for a chair with no wheels. So if you wanted to participate, you could sit in the middle of the chair. I'm 5'2", so if I sit all the way back in the chair, I'm at a disadvantage for this. And we're gonna cross your arms, keep your feet flat on the floor and your back straight. And then we're gonna, Nate, can you time us for 30 seconds?
I'm bringing up my stopwatch here.
I figured you were. You're always on it. So when Nate says go, we're gonna start standing all the way up and sitting all the way back down again.
And so let's all try to count how many repetitions we can get. And so, Kara, if you had to put a number on how many you think you're going to get, where do you think you're going to be?
I should at least be in the 14, 15 range, I believe.
Okay, we'll see.
Yeah.
All right. Everybody's ready? I'm going to count down. 3, 2, 1, go.
1, 2, 3, all the way up.
Halfway there. Stop. All right, Kara, so I noticed that I said stop, and you had just sat down and then you stood back up. So does that count as one, or are you going to count that as one, or?
So if you're up, you don't count it, because I was up. I think we said it. So.
What'd you get? What was your number?
Mine was then 22 that I fully executed.
Okay.
So I don't know myself well.
You're setting the bar too low.
I didn't want to fail with an audience. And it would be failure. But what we would do is we would compare this to norms for your age and gender. All right. And so definitely that's something that you can say it's a little cardio for me, right? I rode my bike in, but you know, I did it in more than 30 seconds. So hopefully we had some people who were able to participate and might be breathing a little hard, got your blood pumping. That's one of our big objectives, because then your brain works better.
Kara, is there a number we should be concerned about if somebody only got 2?
If you were less than 12, depending on your age, that might be something that we would be concerned about. So that's where it's good to really be working with a health professional who's knowledgeable and uses this outcome measure a lot, to be able to figure out what's norm for them. So I think we're good on that. So that was an active test, and now we also want to see how you do staying still. Are you able to stay still? Because that's a big indicator of both the flexibility and the strength to be able to do this task. So the 4-stage balance test is a very kind of basic test. As a PT, I like to dive a lot deeper into things, but this is a good place to start. So if you feel comfortable, you could join us with this test again. I love having people stand at a very sturdy piece of furniture. I tend to indicate the kitchen sink. So Nate keeps disappearing into his background. I'm going to raise my camera just a little bit here. Stand up desk. And be able to move back. I don't know if you're going to be able to see, but I'm going to stand at my chair. All right, so I'm going to stand with my feet together so that if these are my feet, they're directly together on the ground, okay? So I just want to see, can I stand here for 10 seconds without holding on? But if I needed any support, I've got that piece of furniture in front. So we can just count backward from 10 together now. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, hopefully that's not a challenge. So our next is to step so that the instep of one foot is touching the big toe of the other foot. So typically we don't walk like this. It's a little bit dangerous, but we want to see, can you keep your position with a little bit more challenge than you have in everyday work? So again, 10 seconds in this phase. Nate was talking about issues he's had. If you could see me, you would see that my ankles are starting to wibble wobble just a little because I have chronic ankle sprains. So that's one of my injuries that comes back to haunt me during a balance test. So if you did that, that's great. Now you probably had a preferred foot that you put out in front first. We don't discriminate on this testing, but as a matter of balance, Nate and I love to see that you're able to do the same thing with one side that you can do with the other. Symmetry is really important to us. So our next step of this test involves having one foot directly in front of the other, like you're walking a tightrope, or the plank if you're feeling pirate-ish. So definitely you want to be able to stand this way for 10 seconds. And my ankles are going a little bit crazy, but I'm sticking the landing, okay? And every time I challenge myself to do this, I'm actually getting a little bit of exercise. So we're going to pretend that was 10 full seconds there because I talked a lot. Next, we're going to stand on just one leg. Again, it's your preference. So if you can bring one leg up behind you, I think you can barely see mine over my recycle can here, to be able to stand for 10 seconds. And if you needed support, you would have it. That would mean you didn't really make our test, but you're at least challenging yourself. So there we go. After 10 seconds, we would see we've got a baseline of challenges to know what's the right challenge for you at this point.
Yeah, and to just drive some points home that I talked about earlier. So what are we doing? So if you notice, feet together, stand here to the left. We just have our feet together. So what have we done? We've narrowed our base of support. So we've brought our feet in from about shoulder width down to where they're closer together. We're mimicking almost a single point on the floor. So we've decreased our base of support. So that means that our sensation from our feet is going to be really important, okay? Especially as we progress from the left to the right here to standing on one leg. Now, if you think of this functionally too, so when we're ascending or descending stairs, we have to stand on one leg in order to lift the other leg up or down, okay? So that sensation from our feet, particularly what's under our feet, is going to be very important. Now, what you can do with some of these, if you're someone that decides to practice this at home and you want to increase your time from 10 seconds to 30 seconds, or you want to challenge yourself a little bit more, start on the left again, feet together. Let's say you're at 30 seconds to a minute. It's fairly easy. You don't have to touch the counter. Try closing your eyes. Okay, we're taking that visual component out, and now we're relying more on the vestibular system and the body sensation system. All right. Then, if you get to the point to where you're at 60 seconds there, maybe close your eyes and try to rotate your head to the left and right. Make sure that you've got a nice support next to you, though, or a place where you can recover. Particularly a countertop works very nicely because it's not going to move if you do start to lose your balance. So that's a couple ways you can challenge those three systems and really check the integrity of each of those three systems.
Because this relates directly back to the example that Nate gave of walking down the soup aisle in the grocery store, where you're having to turn your head and look at lots of things. Every time you're walking, there's a point where you're only standing on one foot at a time. So we definitely want to be able to capture that with something like this.
And you have to be aware, especially aware of your environment now, to make sure that you're 6 feet apart from the next person too. So maintaining a hypervigilant awareness of your environment is obviously very important right now. So what types of exercise do we recommend, and at what level, for maintaining not only balance but mobility as we get older? So we're all familiar probably with aerobic exercise and resistance exercise. So aerobic exercise is going to be exercise where you're continuously moving large body parts for a long period of time. Okay, so hiking, running, walking, swimming, cycling, and I've got dancing here. Now, depending on who you're dancing with, obviously maybe somebody that you live with at this point in time. But these are all more aerobic activities. So longer durations, continuous activity, large muscle groups. Okay, aerobic is a little different than resistance training. We're going to be working more on the cardiovascular system with aerobic exercise. Resistance exercise is going to be more discontinuous. in that we're going to perform 3 sets of 10 repetitions. If I'm going to lift this bar over my head, I'm going to do it 10 times to where my muscles fatigue, and that's going to be important. So we're going to talk about sets and reps today, and we might list 2 sets of 10 reps. Okay, that means I lift this bar over my head 10 times, I take a break, and then I do another set where I lift it 10 times. Now, lifting it 10 times is great, but does that fatigue your muscle? So I've got a highlighter here, and I could lift this over my head 10 times and do that twice. I just did 2 sets of 10. But if I don't fatigue my muscle, it's not going to repair itself, and then I'm not going to get stronger. So we want to get to that point to where I don't like to necessarily set numbers. We will do that a little bit today just for an example, but anytime you're doing any type of resistance exercise, what I want you all to do is I want you to focus on when do you feel your muscle is fatigued. That should be somewhere around 10 to 12 reps, and then you can adjust your weight appropriately. So resistance training, again, is going to be more discontinuous. You're going to be using some external weight within your environment in order to challenge your muscles. Now, 2 other activities that, actually before we go there, I want to show you all a hybrid program, which is referred to as circuit training. So this is resistance training as well as aerobic exercise at the same time. So we're working on strength, we're working large muscle groups. Okay, we're doing a little bit of resistance training here, some strengthening of the lower extremity. We're also working on our balance. But in this video, you'll notice that we're shifting from one exercise to another exercise with very little rest in between each set. So we're moving from one activity to the next activity to the next activity, and we're using weights, resistance, to help strengthen our muscles. So circuit training is a great way to work on strength, flexibility, and balance. All right, so we'll watch. I'm not going to critique their form too much here. I'd probably tweak a couple things with these individuals, but I'm pleased that they're active and they're moving. Okay, that's the most important thing.
So Nate, we've had a question about if we'll be supplying a copy of the slide presentation to help folks remember how to practice correctly.
Sure, we can do that. All right, so circuit training is just this hybrid between aerobic exercise and resistance training, right? And the 2 that I prematurely started talking about earlier, where you really want to work on your balance, some strength, some flexibility, and highly recommend. And there are a lot of programs in the community, don't know where they're at today with COVID, but a lot of online resources that you can use. And yoga and Tai Chi are 2 activities that are both mind and body exercises, but they're really great for working on strength and balance. Okay. And if what we can also do, Kara, is I'd be happy to supply my email address to any participant. And if they want to reach out and talk to me, I'd be happy to talk to anybody over the phone or via email as well, especially when it comes to finding resources in the city. All right, so this is what you're going to see that's recommended for everybody. So these are the recommended levels of activity for everybody, essentially. But I'm going to caution those of you that maybe aren't as active. This is a target. This is where we eventually want you to be. At this point, Kara and I just want you to move, to start moving. I want you to ask yourself, what is the minimal amount of time that I can dedicate to starting to move each day, okay? With this goal in mind, all right? So again, recommended levels. It's recommended that we get about 150 minutes of moderate level or moderate intensity exercise, aerobic exercise within 1 week, plus 2 days of muscle strengthening exercises. So this bottom row here is represented by the resistance exercises that we talked about. So using some type of weight or something within your environment to challenge your muscles, okay? Now we're gonna talk about what is moderate and what is vigorous, okay? But 150 minutes moderate intensity per week with 2 days of resistance exercises. Or we could cut that in half. We could exercise a little bit more vigorously for 75 minutes a week And then we still have this consistent 2 days of resistance training. Finally, we could have an equivalent mix of moderate to vigorous. And again, that resistance training stays consistent. So the resistance training is not only important to prevent muscle atrophy as we get older, but it's also important for maintaining bone density, right? So I can sit here and tell you 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise, and that probably doesn't mean much to you, okay? So what is moderate intensity exercise? So this is how we try to quantify what moderate or vigorous exercise entails. So this is what is called a rate of perceived exertion scale, and it's going to range anywhere from 6 to 20. And you're probably wondering, well, why is this 6 to 20? And this is all based on your heart rate percentage relative to your age, all right? So if we're working moderately, we want to perceive ourselves as working at a level of 14. So a value of 6 would be no exertion. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm about a 6. Or if I'm laying in bed reading a book, okay, that's a level 6. 20 is where I am cycling uphill with a 100-pound weight vest on in 110-degree heat. I'm dehydrated, so this is maximal effort, and I'm working to the point where I'm getting ready to fall off my bike. All right, so we've got the two extremes here. Moderate would fall somewhere around a 14. Okay, so I'm going to be somewhere between 13 and 15. Okay, again, this is my own perceived level of exertion. Okay, and a level of 14 would be considered moderate. Now, when I start to get into a 17, so if I'm working very hard, that's going to be more vigorous intensity. All right, so when we distribute these slides, you'll have this particular graph here, and you can use this to determine whether or not you're working at a moderate or a vigorous level. There are a whole host of ways to calculate this based on your age. If you'd like to email me or reach out after this talk, we can certainly talk about making this a little bit more specific to your current fitness level. It's not a problem at all. But generally, moderate is going to be around a 14. Vigorous is going to be around a 17. All right, so one other thing that I want to talk about when it comes to movement. So we've talked about intensity, we've talked about frequency, but when I educate my students, I like to talk a little bit about viscosity, okay? In order for our joints to heal, we have to have a low viscosity fluid within our joints that's going to help with nutrient exchange. It's going to help my cartilage heal within that particular joint. Let's say we're talking about my knee. So when I move my knee, that's going to decrease the viscosity of that fluid within my joint, okay? And it's going to allow for more nutrient exchange. So I pulled this off the internet here, and I've learned a little bit about oil over the weekend. And so here we have a lower weight oil on the left, right? And as you can see, we can pour that out and it flows a little bit more like water, okay? It has a nice flow to it. But as we increase the viscosity of that oil, or the weight of the oil here, what you'll notice is we're moving from, again, this isn't quite water, but it's a low viscosity. We're moving from a high flow to a low flow, all right? So we're increasing the thickness. So I like to think of water versus molasses, okay? So water is going to be a low viscosity, molasses is going to be a high viscosity. When we don't move, what happens is the fluid in our joints becomes more viscous. So when we don't move, we move down the line here from left to the right, and the fluid in our joints becomes more viscous, and we can't exchange the nutrients that we need to exchange. So this is why I'm less concerned about if you're someone that doesn't exercise on a regular basis, I'm less concerned about you meeting those targets immediately. I'm more concerned about you just moving. So what I'm just representing here is, if on the x-axis here we have movement, as I increase my movement, how much I move throughout the day, the viscosity of that fluid within my joints starts to decrease, okay? And that allows for nutrient exchange. This is why a lot of people feel like they're stiff in the morning because you haven't been moving your joints, and that fluid in your joints becomes more gelatinous or gel-like. It becomes more viscous. All right, so take-home message here is motion is lotion. Okay, motion allows that fluid within our joints to exchange the appropriate nutrients and allow our tissues to heal. So it's very important to start moving if you're someone that doesn't move on a regular basis. And as you can see, I mean, it's clearly a nice day out at the Legacy Trail behind me. So it's a nice day to go out and take a walk. But I will caution you, if you're someone that does not do this on a regular basis, take it slow. Again, 150 minutes is the target. We don't want you going out and doing that immediately. 75 minutes of vigorous activity between now and next Monday. Okay, take it slow. All right, so Kara and I are going to now talk about some of the exercises that we might recommend. And again, we can distribute these in a handout. So Kara, do you want to take over from here, and I can help
Absolutely.
demonstrate and advance slide as well.
Lovely assistant. Well, everyone is, again, at a different place on their personal fitness journey, but we know as PTs that a few things almost every patient that we see needs. And typically we need a little bit more flexibility in through our trunk. A lot of exercise you hear people talking about your core. Well, that's everything from where you close your mouth to swallow down to your pelvic floor. Everything that holds in your bowels and bladder. So what we want to do is get everything along this part of your body flexible and strong. If you don't have that forward backward balance that Nate was talking about, if your rubber band is tight in the front and overstretched in the back, then you're going to have some difficulties. So with trunk rotation, again, from where your chair is, I think we've got a standing video as well. If you've got something to hold on to, here in my office, I've got some lovely disinfecting wipes. I'm going to be able to, if I'm seated, be able to just turn from sitting up tall as far as I can to the left, and come back to the middle, and turn as far as I can to the right. Starting off kind of slow, because again, if this is the first time you've worked through some rotation in your day, because so much of what we do is just in one plane of bending forward and coming back upright, things might be a little bit stiff. And if you're a little more advanced and you do a little bit of yoga, you could probably be incorporating maybe some breathing into this. And again, we've got a young lady who is really working on a lot more flexibility. But if you're turning, as you turn, you can exhale. As you come back around to the front, you can inhale. As you turn to the right, you can exhale. And inhale on the way back in. This helps you stretch kind of from the inside out. Good. Nate was able to clear some of the allergens he inhaled while he was on the Legacy Trail. All right. So hopefully as you complete a few of those repetitions, you'll be able to feel yourself loosening up. And just looking at time, we want to save time for discussion, so we're not going to do a bunch of reps of anything, if you're cool with that, Dr. Johnson.
Sounds good.
All right, cool. So again, we worked from just the forward straight plane, we rotated, and now we're going to side bend a little bit to get some length, and again, through your trunk here. A lot of us tend to get really tight here. So from either standing or sitting, if you simply put one arm back behind your head, you can start with both arms there. That gives you a little bit of a stretch. Then I'm going to go ahead and take my right hand down toward my right foot and just reach for the floor. So you should feel stretching on the top side of your trunk here. And slowly come back upright. Then we're going to incorporate the breath as we go down on the left side. So if you inhale here at the top, as you reach down, exhale. And you can inhale on the way up. All right. So that way, hopefully, again, you're getting a little stretch from the inside and the outside.
Interestingly, so if you're right hand dominant, your right shoulder might sit a little bit lower than your left shoulder. So when you lean to your left, you might feel a greater stretch on your right side than you do your left side. The reverse, the opposite would be true if you're left-handed.
Definitely, because again, it's your journey, how you've used your body all this time with all the different things you do in your life that are meaningful. So this is just an iteration in standing. So here in my office, I very easily have something I can use to help out with my stretch. You guys at home would probably have a towel to just be able to, again, keep a nice, consistent alignment of your body. And as you change this alignment, you'll feel stretches at different parts of your body. So feel free and experiment, because just like you would say in yoga, you have to know your body, and you don't want to push yourself at too consistent of a basis, and you don't need to be, because if Nate and I were doing yoga in the same room, he would blow a gasket, because I tend to be a little more physically flexible than he is. So
there'd be no competition.
Yeah, this chest stretch is really important, because so much of life happens in front of us. You're reading the paper, you're on a device, you're interacting with a person, you're walking the dog, you're cooking, everything is in front of you. So we tend to get a little tight in the front and overstretched in the back. So if you're able to clasp your hands behind your back, the small of your back, relax your arms down. You're gonna inhale. Look up and push those hands down. And exhale. As you come back to the middle. So as you look up, everybody go at your own pace. You can inhale. And exhale.
I'm feeling better already.
I'm a little tight, so it was hard for me to inhale all the way up. I really need to stretch the upper part of my trunk a little bit. We kayaked this week, and so I'm a little tight up here, I think. So definitely, those are a couple of great ways to get your upper body moving. And then the legs, we talked about how important it is to have the power in your legs to get upright. We see a lot of people who kind of lose that. And so definitely in sitting, it's very easy to just at a commercial break or, when you are sitting around waiting on somebody, well, I'm going to go ahead and kick my legs out straight. I've already moved my camera, so it's going to be hard to see, but just being able to kick from your knee all the way out straight, right? So that's something that you could do just to stay busy, even if you're a really physically fit person and this is no challenge at all. That's one more piece of activity you can add to your day. You can challenge yourself to sustain that for a little bit longer. But here's an advancement on this where we could work up to more activities with a little bit of resistance if you wanted. Okay, so this young lady is taking her leg up and then making sure that she's able to lower it down slowly so you have control, because there's a shortening contraction when you lift something, and then there's the slow contraction when you're lowering it down. And we always love to see people able to lower themselves down into a seated position with care, kind of like what we did in our test earlier today.
No plopping.
No plopping. That's a rule. You don't want to break any eggs if they're sitting on the chair underneath you. So another thing that's really important related to your ability to know where you are in space and have that sensation from your feet coming up to your brain to tell you is to maintain good control of the muscles around your ankle, so that when you get those messages, you're able to efficiently keep yourself balanced. So if you're seated, you can work on just bringing your toes up and down, right? That's another one to help with the viscosity of all that fluid in your knees and ankles as well. That'll start to get you moving a little bit better. So if you're ready to advance that from the seated position, or you have the time to do this, you're able to again go back to that kitchen countertop or kitchen sink or a very sturdy piece of furniture to be able to work on bringing your toes up in the air. And as you see this young lady, she doesn't stick her booty out. That's the number one rule of cheating for that. If you're sticking your booty out, you're actually not doing the right thing. We just want to see how well you can activate the muscles that are really on the outside of your leg, lower leg. Then you can switch gears and be able to take your hands and support away if you're able. So same activity, just a little bit of a different range. And here we've got the calf raises, where now you're going to strengthen the back part of your calf to be able to, I'm 5'2", reach into a countertop. Or a cabinet. I'm always reaching for something. I never can reach anything. But also it's something that you would need to be able to do to balance yourself if you get maybe nudged from behind by that 6-foot shopping cart socially distancing tool that people are using these days, right? It's a tool for that as well. If someone kind of is losing track. So you got to be able to keep your balance. So being able to perform calf raises and those toe raises are really important for your overall balance. And those are good for almost everybody. Much like the test we had done earlier, with the sit to stand, we want to make sure that people are able to be nice and safe with every bit of that range, from all the way sitting to all the way standing and all the way back down. So if you need to use your arms to help, that's fine. That's, if you're getting activity, you'd be moving yourself up that scale for more strength. So I know that when Nate and I are in clinic and we're working with someone who's having trouble with this activity, we might even figure out where the problem is and stop them right before they get to the plopping point and say, okay, now come all the way up from here and go all the way down, and try to work just a little bit lower incrementally so that we avoid the plop zone. Step 1. So this activity is a little bit different. We're going to be working on standing. We'll start with standing on 2 feet here. If this isn't enough of a challenge, we'll show you how to work on this. But what we're going to have you do is, reach that arm out like it's part of a clock to 6, 3, 12. If you're fancy, 9. Okay. Because this gets you both understanding where you are in space and challenging your balance. So this is a little bit of a multitask. You're doing 2 things at once, and we're using movement in all those different planes. And we talked about balance earlier. Whatever you do to symmetry, whatever you do for one side of the body, we want to do for the other. So we want to be able to work this range. So Nate would say, if you want more of a challenge and you have the flexibility, you could always watch where your hand goes, because then you're turning your head. And you saw me start to lose my balance because I'm not holding on to anything. So I need to work on that, folks.
Carrie, you want to make this the last one, and then we can send out
Absolutely. Yeah.
Material.
So we worked on the fronts of your legs, your thighs, and we also want to get your hamstrings in the back, because these can help slow you down when you're working. So our lady here is back to show us again how to do this activity. Holding on, you're gonna work on just kicking up towards your behind. So again, you could work on the endurance and the resistance there.
So yeah, so we've, just due to time, we've done a tiny bit of recommended exercises with you all today. We'd love to do more if we had more time.